How I almost lost my husband of 20 years due to a need for attention and validation from another man. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. How I almost lost my husband of 20 years due to a need for attention and validation from another man. I met my husband in 1999. I was 19. He was 24. It was a summer camp as his mother was running, and we both were camp counselors. It was lost at first sight to a moment and laid eyes in him. I knew it would eventually, and rather quickly turn to love. But here was this bear of a young man, 64, 228 pounds, rock solid, physique, chiseled, square jaw, plate, fullback, and high school, and college. He was the most gorgeous being I'd ever laid eyes on. He started dating, not even a month after the camp ended, and by 2001, we were married. For the next early 2 decades, he did everything and gave me everything I could ever want. My husband has been the definition of provider and protector. He gave me a life where if I wanted to quit my job and be a stay-at-home mom for over 3 children, I could do so and would never miss a step. My income is supplemental as best. I'm making good amount, but my husband's take-home dwarfs on my own. So how the hell, or more importantly, what the hell did I cheat on him for 9 months? Selfishness? Plain and simple. He's the only man I'd ever been intimate with up until my affair. Sure, he showed me plenty of affection and Elvis' life was awesome, but I never had my crazy 20s. I felt like she showed me love and affection because he had to, being my husband. We live in a decent-sized town in South Carolina, but generally ever know someone who knows the next person. You get idea? So the vast majority of people knew that I was always wife. So I never got the dreaded word attention. That's where, came into the picture. I worked for my company, but one of the Northeast offices. My company was doing an aggressive expansion in the South region, and he was moved to my office around Shu in 2019. His main task was to facilitate transitional expansion and trained who was ultimately going to be his position in the region. Me. I'm the student polar opposite of my husband. My husband is a big ruck outdoors man. He power lift is covered with tattoos, and has long hair and a big but a soft-spoken. Not introvert, but not bustful. His pie is humble man. MS lender addresses and designer names. Drove an ODRs 5, and it was a very outspoken and had strong. He also had a silver tongue, and I admit I feel for it. Naturally, we work quite closely, and M would pay me all kinds of compliments. It started out work-related, but evolved to subtle compliments of my appearance, and they lapped the attention up. I was smitten by him. He wrapped his tendrils around me, and I was too foolish to resist him. I can find it in him. I began returning his affection because I was hooked on the idea of this clean-cut pretty boy. Showing me with our duration, I had justified in my mind that I wanted to experience this because it was a new and exciting. In hindsight, it listens on this reasoning I've ever imagined. By August, it was a full-blown EA. And Halloween 2019 is where it became physical. But a company Halloween party I had went with a few of my friends. Normally, all would come, but he was just 3 months removed of neck surgery, and in no condition to party, so he told me to go on and have a good time. Emma and I met the tail end of the party and ended up back in displays. I was fully aware of what is going to happen, and I went ahead with it, thinking only of myself and my own needs. I justified it in my head by saying, "This is my experience." My husband began to suspect things. Thanksgiving Day. At this point, the fog had completely engulfed me, and I was in contact with them as many times as I could. I'd started to pull away from my husband between October to then, especially since there hadn't been one since we'd been intimate. His surgery considerably hindered his movement. I had stepped outside of my parents' sport, and he followed me outside saying, "Whoever it is, tell them you're with your family." Had gotten pretty annoyed with how much I was checking my phone and sending texts, and I'd lied to him, telling him it was one of the younger girls in my team who had recently broken up with her boyfriend and was going to be alone for the holidays. He presses me over his issue with it on a way home. And after we put the kids to bed, and I snapped at him. "So now for the first time you're really our entire marriage." There was a hint or resentment between us, and in hindsight, I'm disgusted with how I treated him. I must have been out of my fucking mind. Fast forward to May 2020 when everything went south. I was now working remotely due to COVID, when my husband, who is now back working, hadn't been cleared by his doctor in March. Due to the fact that a lot of the guys at his work were for a load, he had to pull 10 to 12 days, sometimes 4 days a week. The kid would do their homeschooling, then either go to their friend's house one street down or to my husband's parents' house. They're very close to their grandparents, both mine and O's. This would give me several hours in a house alone. And you guessed it? I invited him over. Happened several times over the spring, but a one day in late May is one I dread and will never soon forget. I never heard his truck pull up, never heard him enter the house, or it come up the stairs. Always the mountain of a man, so normally, you know exactly where he is in the house, by the sound of his footsteps. And I over right smack in the middle of it when I noticed always standing in a doorway with his phone out. It's the single darkest and most embarrassing moment of my life. Even recalling it now makes me sick to my stomach and teary-eyed. I pushed him off me and just stared at O. The only words that I could even master out of my tombous mouth was, "I can explain." "Krisha, right?" O loves at me manually, and dresses me down before telling me to pack up your shit and get the fuck out of my house. He said it with such a ferocity and finality, but I knew there was a note coming back. I've never heard that level of furring in his voice. 21 years I've known this man. He'll leave some clothes to tour behind him, and the way of what just happened flat ends to me. All I could do was fall to my knees and scream, and then starts yelling at me also. I really couldn't tell you what he said if I tried. I was in a state of shock. He's screaming at me the whole time while I'm trying to gather whatever stuff I'd need in the immediate. Emma put his stuff on and was adamant about not wanting to leave my bedroom alone because he was afraid my husband would cave his call in. Remember? Always about 2 times the size of M. I opened the door and am curious out of, like, scared or rodent. I try to approach O and extremely says, "Don't choose fucking dare." The words are burnt into my mind. The pure rage in his eyes absolutely shook me to my core. I just wet my face, picked up my bag and left. I looked around the house as I left thinking, this was the last time I'd ever see it. As it is his house, an inheritance from his grandfather who owned the land and built the house literally with his bare hands. By the time I reached the driveway, was gone. and the keys to my car were back in the house. I was no longer welcomed in. I've never felt more alone than that moment. I couldn't call my sister or my parents as I grew up in a super southern conservative home. That completely disowned me if they knew what I've done, especially since they absolute endured. Oh, I have no brothers. So I always liked the son of my father never had. He'd be especially hurt by it. The only person I could call was my best friend Rain, who I've known since grade school. I called and explained her everything. She offered to come pick me up, but I told her, no, I find my own way to replace. The next 2 days were agonizing. I tried calling and text every chance I could, which been crying getting dressed down by Rain for being a total fuck up. I tried calling his parents, but his father told me the kids are gonna stay here a few days. You need to give O space. He'll reach out on you when he's ready. Before hanging up on me, so that meant, O had told his parents what happened. I began to resign myself to the fact that I was about to become an ex-wife. There's no way I could come back from this. I just ruined a 20-year marriage and broke the heart of the only man I've ever loved because I needed to have a fling. But then day +3, finally, he answered me and told me I could come home. Rain drove me back, and upon going inside, we sit in a couch. Rains arrives beside me as Oates hears me and you won. In 21 years, he's never so much as a racist voice at me. And here he was shouting at me for a good 40 minutes it felt. He asked me why I did what I did, and I answered him honestly. I didn't guess let or lie. I fucked up, and I owned it. I'm not ashamed to say it, back on my knees for him not to leave me. He tells me after all of it has not going to file for divorce, but things were about to change and not for the better for me. It appeared he'd spent today's support from you devising terms of reconciliation, which included me resigning from a job, getting all contact from M, giving him all of M's contact info so he could monitor M if it tries to contact me himself, and signing a post-nap later in the week. There was another stipulation he made that I won't mention because I don't want anyone to think he's a horrible person. He's not. I deserved all I brought upon myself for breaking my vows to him. I accepted his terms willingly. 2 days later, we met with a family, a lawyer he had contacted, and I signed a post-nap. No lawyer of my own because I wasn't contesting what I did. It's been 7 months since, and I do everything and anything I can to try and ace his hurt, and he is hurting. We're doing couples counseling, and I see the therapist 2 times a week to deal with my own feeling and come to terms with what I did. He puts in a brave face in front of everyone, as the only people who know are as Rain. Experience, and them, but it tears me to trend seeing how much I wounded him. He was always a jovial, warm-hearted person. It's hard to find that warmth anymore. He tries. He really does, but I broke the spirit with what I did. And I am ashamed of myself for it. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror, to the point where I cut my hair and dyed it dark brown. I'm naturally strawberry blonde because I couldn't stand what stared back at me. I didn't try to smoother him. I give him space. I watch. If he asks something of me, I do it willingly, with no questions asked. The most jarring aspects of this all, aside from this stipulation, I don't want to mention is the fact that he addresses me by my first name. For 20 years, I've been baby doll. Now I'm just B. That hurts in a way it didn't even anticipate it would, but I accept it. I deserve it. And if I wanna earn my title of a baby doll bag, I have to build back his threats to me and restore his manhood. I have to be better than what I was before. He's afforded me a second chance, and I rightly don't deserve, and I refused to take it or him for granted. Never again will I stray, never again will I give him reason to lose faith in me. I love my husband and through the core of my being, and I will do anything I can within God-given ability to show him that. Today is our 20th anniversary. This morning, while we were eating breakfast with the kids, he kissed me on the lips for the first time since D-Day and said, "Happy New Year." My heart melted, and I had to excuse myself from the table to go into the guest bathroom and cry. I never been more overcome with emotion at once in my life. Happiness, sadness, shame, regret. I think I had an anxiety attack, to be honest. A few minutes later comes into the bathroom and it just run into his arms. I squeeze him as hard as my tiny self can around his waist, burying my face in his chest and only crying another 10 minutes. He just stands there. His arms wrap around me and hold me. I truly don't deserve this man, this beautiful, kind, warm-hearted, spirited, and just a man. Even with how badly I hurt him, he takes care of me. I will never jeopardize losing him ever again.